Hey guys, tonight we dive into the marble halls, candlelit corridors, and shadowy plots of ancient Rome, where being emperor doesn't exactly come with a great health plan. The food is lavish, the baths are steamy, and the togas are flowing. But the assassins, they're a real occupational hazard. You're about to step into a time where ruling the world usually meant an early and very creative death. But not always. Picture this. You're in your late 70s, sipping watered-down wine beneath the blazing Mediterranean sun, casually running the biggest empire the world has ever seen. Sounds cozy? Well, for some Roman emperors, that wasn't far from the truth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I'm always curious. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the year 44 BCE, trudging through the cold marble floors of Rome's palaces in borrowed sandals. You've heard whispers. Julius Caesar's been stabbed in the Senate, and now the power vacuum's so strong it's pulling in every ambitious Roman like a whirlpool. Out of the chaos rises a young, sickly, and politically sharp teenager, Gaius Octavius, who will soon rename himself Augustus and make history as Rome's first emperor. You don't expect him to last. He's got everything going against him. He's weak, physically unimpressive, and surrounded by sharks. But somehow, you watch him outmaneuver, outlive, and outlast every one of them. He lives until 75, which is like turning 110 in Roman political years. You smell the sweet must of papyrus as Augustus writes law after law, each one subtly cementing his power. You feel the crisp sting of winter wind coming off the Tiber as he publicises his moral reforms, encouraging marriage, childbearing, and good old-fashioned Roman virtue, while quietly banishing his own daughter for not following them. Classic dad energy. And yet, Augustus doesn't rule with brute force. No, you notice the way he smiles at senators, lets them think they're important, then gently rearranges their power behind the scenes. He builds an image of stability. Rome isn't under a dictator, it's under princeps, the first citizen. Wink wink. Still death lurks. You sidestep through his palace, noticing every taste tester nervously eyeing their plate. Poisoning is almost a sport now. His wife Livia, rumoured to have a special talent for quietly eliminating rivals, keeps him surrounded by figs and suspicions. There's even a theory she slowly poisoned Augustus over years to ensure her son, Tiberius, becomes heir. Historians still argue whether Livia's machinations were real or retroactive gossip. But one thing's for sure, Augustus keeps power like a man walking a tightrope, with sandals covered in olive oil. You're there when he survives multiple illnesses, witnessing Rome go pale as its beloved emperor lies bedridden again. He recovers every time though, perhaps out of sheer stubbornness or a bit of divine PR. After all, by now he's got temples and altars built in his honour. You run your fingers along the golden statues lining the forum. Each one says, "This man is eternal. This man is Rome." Even though his body aches and he reportedly loses teeth in old age, Augustus keeps up appearances. You almost feel bad when he stumbles in public, until you hear he rehearsed even that fall, so it would look dignified. His reign stretches for 40 years, a reign that outlasts rebels, plots, wars, and a few very awkward family holidays. You recline in the warm, flickering lamplight of his final hours at Nola, where he utters his last, maybe too theatrical words. Have I played my part well? Then applaud as I exit. Yeah, you can almost hear the slow clapping from the Senate, partly in respect, partly relieved. But here's the thing, Augustus wasn't just lucky, he was careful. He made alliances, then broke them when they stopped being useful. He kept the army happy and never let the Senate feel completely sidelined. His peace, Pax Romana, wasn't just a marketing term. It was real, and it helped that anyone who challenged it conveniently disappeared. The man even had time to pen his autobiography, the Res Gestae, a very casual list of his accomplishments, carved into stone and distributed across the empire like an ancient press release. "Look what I did," he says, centuries before Instagram made that cool. You sit with that for a moment. How a man born sickly and overshadowed could become the most powerful person in the known world and actually live to enjoy it. It's rare, and it's only the beginning. You're back in Rome, but the atmosphere feels thicker. Augustus is dead and the marble gleam of his era is already dimming. You're brushing against shadowed columns as power shifts to a man no one quite trusts, not even himself. His name is Tiberius, and he's Augustus's stepson, reluctant, resentful, and ruthlessly efficient. Tiberius doesn't charm. He doesn't even try. He's the kind of guy who'd rather read a manual on siege warfare than throw a party. And yet, you watch him become emperor in 14 CE, slipping into power like a man sliding into cold water. There's no charisma, no triumph, just a sense that everything will now run on discipline, dread, and quiet whispers. He's 55 when he takes the throne, already old by Roman standards, but he'll rule for more than 2 decades. That alone makes him a unicorn among emperors. You watch him age into power, and somehow power only sharpens his edges. His paranoia starts small, like someone rearranging the furniture in their mind. At first he maintains Augustus's traditions, maybe out of obligation, maybe to keep the wolves at bay, but you notice the way he eyes his advisors. Every look feels like a test. He doesn't want a friend, he wants absolute control. As you walk through his Rome, you see statues of Augustus still standing tall. Tiberius never quite escapes that long shadow. Historians still argue whether he even wanted to rule, or if he was cornered into it by his mother Livia and the manipulative machinery Augustus left behind. Soon the city grows colder under his rule. Trials multiply. Treason laws tighten. You feel it in the streets, people speak more softly, eyes darting toward corners. Informers become common. Even old senators hesitate before a toast. And then, around 26 CE, Tiberius does something that surprises even jaded Rome. He leaves. Not for a quick vacation. He moves out. You follow him across the sea to the island of Capri, a dramatic cliffside retreat where blue water crashes against white stone. The air here is thick with pine and salt, and the view is stunning, but there's an edge of menace to everything. Tiberius builds villas on high ridges, always with a view, always watching. Roman historians, mostly writing later, and with axes to grind, paint Capri as a nightmare of depravity and isolation. Stories swirl, dark, dramatic, and often wildly exaggerated. Caligula, his grandnephew and eventual heir, supposedly gets a front row seat to all of it. There are tales of human sacrifices, cruel punishments, and even forced dives from high cliffs. But here's your fringe tidbit. Archaeologists on Capri have found gorgeous frescoes, clever water systems, and thoughtful architecture. Maybe the island was less haunted than historians claimed. Maybe. Still, you can't shake the feeling of tension. Capri isn't a retreat, it's a fortress. Tiberius keeps a rotating cast of advisors, but one name rises like steam from a bath. Sejanus, prefect of the Praetorian Guard, master of flattery and future plotter. Sejanus begins consolidating power, while Tiberius lounges on the island. You smell the oily perfume of letters carried back and forth, full of coded commands, and for a while, Rome is basically being run by a man in sandals with a direct line to the palace guard. Not a comforting thought. Until, suddenly, it's over. You feel the shift. A whisper in the Senate. A message intercepted. Tiberius, old but not out, crushes Sejanus like an olive pit. Publicly. Brutally. You can almost hear the gasps as Sejanus is dragged away mid-meeting. His statues are toppled, his family arrested, and his memory erased with surgical precision. Tiberius is nearly 70 now. Most emperors are dead long before this point. By dagger, poison, or poorly timed public speeches. Not him. He just keeps aging, retreating further into himself. He trusts no one. You watch him develop elaborate escape routes in his villas. He sleeps in multiple rooms. He rarely returns to Rome. You pass him pacing a portico, robes rustling in the coastal breeze. He talks to no one. You wonder if he even talks to himself. The power hasn't aged him, not exactly. It's calcified him, turned him into a kind of living warning. In 37 CE, he finally dies. But even that moment is confusing. Some accounts say he collapses in bed and quietly expires. Others claim he wakes up after being declared dead, gasps for air, and is then smothered with a pillow by a panicked Praetorian guard. One version even blames Caligula. Historians still argue whether Tiberius died naturally or assisted. He was 77. 77. That's outrageous for a Roman emperor, especially one so hated. You glance around the empire and realise that his survival came not from popularity or joy or even strategy, but from distance. Tiberius outlived most of his enemies simply by removing himself from their reach. No grand parades, no heroic tales, just a long, cold watch from a beautiful island where the waves never stop crashing. And somewhere, you imagine, you're standing behind a curtain peeking into a chaotic Roman hallway where everyone's panicking. The emperor is dead. Again. But this time, no one knows who's in charge. You hear footsteps, fast, frantic, and then the guards drag out an old man, with a limp and a stammer, hiding behind a curtain. You blink. That guy, that's Claudius. You're not the only one confused. It's 41 CE, and after the absolute disaster of Caligula, who, let's be honest, set the bar for bad emperors so low it's buried in the catacombs, Rome needs something, anything, that doesn't scream chaos. And Claudius? He's been ignored his whole life, mocked, left out of the power games. Everyone assumes he's too awkward, too slow, too weird to be dangerous. So naturally, he becomes emperor. You can't help but root for him. He's like the underdog in a toga. He stutters, he drools a bit, and yes, he walks with a limp, but he's also brilliant. You see him hunched over scrolls for hours, a history nerd turned ruler, and once he gets into power, he's weirdly great at it. He revives infrastructure like he's playing a very committed game of SimCity. Aqueducts, roads, grain distribution, check, check, and check. You watch him lean into the logistics, turning Rome from a chaotic mess into something a little more functional. Your sandals crunch over new cobblestones he commissioned. You drink cleaner water because of him. You even see the harbour at Ostia expanding under his orders, built to withstand the rough seas, and more impressively, Roman bureaucracy. But ruling is never just about good plumbing. You also need to survive dinner. And Claudius, despite his intellect, makes a questionable life decision. He marries Messalina. Messalina is young, cunning, and has a reputation that would make even Caligula raise an eyebrow. Rumours swirl of secret marriages, public affairs, and late-night escapades that would make your grandma drop her knitting. One possibly true tale? She allegedly challenges Rome's top courtesan to a last woman standing contest and wins. Yikes. You wonder how Claudius doesn't see it, or maybe he does and just compartmentalizes. He's busy rewriting laws after all. But eventually, even he can't ignore it. When Messalina secretly marries her lover in a bizarre, real ceremony, while Claudius is out of town, it's a bridge too far. You can practically feel the eye twitch. He has her executed, quietly but decisively. It's not just personal, it's survival. Still, he doesn't give up on love, or at least political marriage. Enter Agrippina the Younger, niece of Claudius and mother of a sullen teen named Nero. Agrippina is sharp, ambitious, and absolutely playing the long game. She marries Claudius and convinces him to adopt Nero, pushing her son toward the throne. You watch it all like a slow-moving political thriller. Claudius starts giving Nero special privileges. He's old now, in his 60s, grey and worn, but still functioning. And then, in 54 CE, something goes wrong. Mushrooms. That's right, mushrooms. One version says Agrippina serves him a poisoned batch of his favourite dish. Others suggest the poison doesn't quite kill him, so she calls in a physician to finish the job with a feather dipped in poison down the throat. Try sleeping after that imagery. Historians still argue whether Agrippina killed him or if he simply died from illness. But honestly, given her ambition and his inconvenient timing, you do the math. Here's the twist. Claudius makes it to 63. He rules for 13 years, longer than anyone expected, and actually leaves Rome in better shape than he found it. That's more than you can say for most emperors. You touch the smooth marble base of one of his statues, mostly forgotten, and realise how easily the quiet ones are overlooked. Claudius, the scholar emperor, the man people laughed at, ends up reshaping Rome's administration. He even opens the Senate to provincials, outsiders, which some elite Romans treat like letting pigeons into the palace. He writes books, dozens of them, histories, Etruscan studies, linguistic texts. None survive, of course, because why preserve the useful stuff when you can keep endless busts of Nero? Still, you imagine him pacing his library, muttering Latin under his breath, scratching notes in wax tablets. Not flashy, not fearsome, but competent. Until the mushrooms. His legacy? Not immortality, not divine worship, but maybe something even rarer, quiet effectiveness. You glance around the palace one last time. It's calmer now, until you hear faint singing and distant firelight flickering in the corridors. Uh-oh, Nero's warming up. You smell it before you see it. Smoke on the wind, curling through the alleyways of Rome like a warning. Fires don't just start in this city. They devour. You squint into the hazy distance, and sure enough, the horizon glows orange. And somewhere, perched on a private rooftop garden, is Nero. He's not fiddling, by the way, that's a myth. There weren't even fiddles yet. But is he composing music while the city burns? Maybe. Is he rushing into the streets to help? Or even pretending to? Not so much. Nero isn't about action. He's about image. You're in the thick of it now. Nero's reign. He becomes emperor at just 16 years old in 54 CE. The robes are too big, the crown is metaphorical but heavy, and the empire already cracking at the edges. But none of that matters to young Nero. He's Rome's rock star. You trail behind him as he struts through the palace halls, flanked by sycophants and poets, dripping in scented oils. You half expect him to drop an album. Early on, though, things go surprisingly smoothly, mostly thanks to his mother, Agrippina, who's still pulling strings like a backstage manager. She's everywhere, whispering into his ear, appearing beside him in portraits, even sitting in on Senate meetings. At some point, you feel the tension crackle. Nero's had enough. Historians still argue whether Agrippina overplayed her hand or whether Nero was always going to go full Macbeth. But by 59 CE, he's planning her death. First attempt, a boat designed to collapse. Agrippina survives. Second attempt, assassins. That works. Allegedly, she tells them to strike the womb that bore him. You stand in that eerie silence afterward, watching Nero pace, wide-eyed, unravelling by the minute. With Mom out of the picture, the guardrails are gone. Nero leans fully into his artistic side. Poetry, theatre, lyre performances where no one's allowed to leave. Ever. You sit through one, clapping politely, wondering if he's going to make you review it afterward. And then comes 64, see the Great Fire. You stand in the street, heat licking your face as buildings collapse and people flee. Nero doesn't start the fire, at least no solid evidence says he did, but his response is questionable. He uses the burned-out city blocks to build his dream palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. You walk through its shimmering halls, dazzled and slightly disgusted. A rotating ceiling, artificial lakes. It's not a house, it's a god complex with plumbing. To deflect blame, Nero does something awful. He points the finger at a new strange sect in Rome, the Christians. You watch helpless as innocent people are rounded up and executed in public spectacles. This is where the Nero most people remember takes shape. Not the awkward teen, but the tyrant in eyeliner. He executes his own wife, then his next wife, possibly his third wife too, depending on who you believe. You follow him from city to city in Greece, where he performs on stage, finally achieving what he thinks is greatness, adulation, ovation, self-declared artistic immortality. He even competes in the Olympics, where, shockingly, he wins every event he enters, despite falling off his chariot mid-race. Must be the sandals. Back in Rome, the Senate and army are losing patience. You can feel the empire fraying. Provinces revolt. Generals rise. One named Galba openly declares himself emperor. Nero? He panics. He tries to flee, then hide. He begs someone, anyone, to kill him, but no one will. Finally, in 68 CE, he takes his own life with the help of a servant. His last words reportedly echo, "What an artist dies in me." He was 30, you shake your head. 30, all that destruction, paranoia, beauty, music and blood, and it fits inside 3 short decades. And here's the twist. Despite it all, Nero almost survives in memory as a folk hero. Later centuries weirdly admire him. Maybe it's the music. Maybe it's the sheer drama. Maybe everyone just loves a good villain. Still, some ancient sources like Suetonius and Tacitus seem determined to paint him with the darkest brush available. Others hint he wasn't all bad. That early in his reign, he tried. That he could have been something different. Historians still argue whether Nero's madness was innate or engineered. Was he a product of too much power too young? A mama's boy turned megalomaniac? Or just a creative spirit crushed by the machinery of empire? You walk the burned-out paths of old Rome, now rebuilt atop the ruins, and you hear rumours that Nero didn't die at all, that he faked his death and will return, Messiah style. It's nonsense, but telling. He's the emperor Rome couldn't let go of, and yet, despite all the fire, all the scandal, he lived 14 years in power. For a Roman emperor, that's not bad. Not Augustus good, but better than expected. You stand outside the ruins of the Golden House. It's dark, quiet. A few bats flit by, their wings whispering like secrets. And in the stillness, you can almost hear it, softly, faintly, the strum of a lyre. Nero and Hoadsahem. You step carefully across cracked tiles, their mosaic faces warped by time, and realise you've entered a vacuum. A power vacuum. Nero's gone, and the empire. It's not just leaderless, it's unravelling in real time. This is 69 CE, a year so unstable it gets a special name, the Year of the Four Emperors. You know you're in for it when a whole year is branded like a disaster documentary. The first to jump in is Galba, the elderly governor of Hispania. You watch him march into Rome like a grumpy substitute teacher sent to manage a classroom mid-riot. He doesn't bribe the Praetorian Guard, doesn't sweet-talk the Senate. Instead, he pinches pennies and executes rivals like he's clipping dead leaves off a dying plant. Within 7 months, Galba's lying in a pool of blood in the Roman Forum, his head paraded around on a soldier's pike. You hear one bystander mutter, "That escalated quickly," and you can't disagree. Next up, Otho. Think of him as Nero's old party buddy turned emperor. He lasts 3 months. You blink, and he's at war with Vitellius, the third contestant in this brutal imperial talent show. The two clash at the Battle of Bedriacum. Otho loses, takes one look at the chaos, and decides to exit the stage with dignity. He commits suicide to prevent further civil war. A rare move in Rome. You almost want to applaud. Vitellius, though, he's not here to make friends. You shadow him as he swaggers into the palace, gorging on banquets and promising stability. But Rome isn't listening. In the east, legions are rallying behind a new name, Vespasian, a general with a weathered face, gravel voice, and zero tolerance for drama. You follow Vespasian's slow, methodical takeover. His troops sack Cremona. The Senate flips like a nervous coin. When Vespasian finally enters Rome in late 69 CE, Vitellius tries to hang on, but it's too late. You can still hear the screams in the forum where Vitellius is dragged from his hiding place, pleading, clutching a statue's foot. His end is messy, brutal. Not all emperors get a dramatic farewell. Some just get kicked to death. And finally, mercifully, things settle. Vespasian takes the throne, and incredibly, keeps it. You blink at the sheer normalcy he brings. After a year of blood and chaos, he feels like a functioning adult. The empire exhales, you do too. Vespasian doesn't pretend to be a god. He doesn't throw wild orgies or burn down the Senate. He taxes urine. That's right, public urinals become a revenue stream. When criticised, he holds up a coin and says, "Money doesn't stink." You chuckle. The man has dad jokes and economic reforms. He also starts one of Rome's most iconic projects, the Flavian Amphitheatre. You'll know it later as the Colosseum. Walking through its skeleton as it rises stone by stone, you get chills. Not from grandeur yet, but from how this space will become a stage for survival. Gladiators, beasts, cheers, and death, all for entertainment, all stamped with Vespasian's name. You feel a shift. Rome is moving from chaos into construction. Bureaucracy stabilizes. The military gets reorganized. Provinces are brought back in line. And Vespasian? He just keeps on living. And living. He makes it to 69 years old, ruling for a decade. Not flashy, not immortalized in drama, but strong, solid, survivable. Historians still argue whether Vespasian was truly beloved or just the least terrifying option, but most agree he did what the empire needed when it needed it. And when he's dying in 79 CE, you're there in the room, silent as his final words slip out. "I think I'm becoming a god." That dry Roman humour, even at the end. You stand over his ashes and glance across the forum. Nero's golden house is being filled in, literally buried to make room for new monuments. Vespasian is rewriting not just history, but the landscape itself. What's left behind isn't gold ceilings or burning theatres. It's roads, grain shipments, civic pride, things that last, things that matter when the party ends and someone has to clean up. And now you start to sense something else, a legacy forming. Because Vespasian doesn't just fix Rome, he starts a dynasty, one that will give you the next story, one of resilience, and of another emperor who will also, shockingly, live long enough to finish what he starts. You breathe in the night air, still scented faintly with ash and laurel, and wait for the next chapter. The storm has passed, for now. The dust hasn't even settled over Vespasian's funeral pyre when his son steps into view, calm, commanding, maybe even a little smug. You watch the torches flicker across his face and you realise this guy knows exactly what he's doing. This is Titus, and he's walking into history with sandals polished and a reputation that's complicated. You've actually seen him before, during his father's reign, always hovering nearby, handling things quietly but firmly. He led the Roman legions during the brutal siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. You remember the smoke from that too. The temple burning, the city falling. Historians still argue whether Titus tried to preserve the city or whether he unleashed destruction to send a message. But either way, the result is unforgettable. Rome celebrates his victory with a giant arch, still standing centuries later. You pass under it now, eyeing the carved menorah and the bound captives. Glory for one, devastation for another. So when he takes over after Vespasian's death in 79 CE, you're prepared for an iron-fisted militarist. But what you get is surprisingly gentle. Titus becomes one of Rome's rare nice guy emperors. You hang around the palace and notice something weird. People like him. He stops treason trials. He doesn't execute senators on a whim. He responds to petitions from citizens like he's running customer service. Once, when he fails to help someone during the day, he reportedly mutters, "Friends, I have wasted a day." You blink. That's Un-Roman, but Rome being Rome, disaster is never far. You're there when Mount Vesuvius explodes. August 79 CE. The earth shudders, the sky goes black, and hot ash rains down like a punishment from Jupiter himself. Pompeii, Herculaneum, 2 thriving towns are buried alive in a single terrifying day. You hear the screams, feel the ground crack, smell the sulphur, and while others flee or panic, Titus doesn't hide. He sends aid, opens his own treasury, tours the devastation himself. It's one of the earliest recorded examples of imperial disaster relief. A year later, a fire ravages Rome. Then a plague hits, triple whammy. You wonder if Titus broke a mirror, or walked under a ladder, or angered the gods. But he doesn't flinch. He's out there again, helping, quietly, consistently, like a guy just trying to hold it together, while everything burns, and then, just as quickly as he rises, he's gone. 81 CE. Titus falls ill. Maybe malaria, maybe something worse. Some whisper that his brother Domitian poisons him, though there's no real proof. Historians still argue over the truth, but Titus dies at 41, barely 2 years into his reign. You sit beside his statue, small and unassuming, tucked in the corner of the forum. He didn't conquer swaths of land or invent bizarre traditions. He didn't build golden palaces or write gloomy poetry. He simply led well, and that in Rome is rare. But don't worry, you're not done with this family yet, because just as Titus fades from view, a shadow grows behind you, colder, sharper, less forgiving. Domitian. Titus's younger brother takes the throne next, and he's not interested in being liked. You follow him into the palace where mirrors are covered and whispers echo through long dim corridors. He doesn't throw parties, he throws purges. Where Titus was open and warm, Domitian is distant and suspicious. You feel the tension in the air like static. The Senate pretends to love him. The army actually does, because he pays them well and leads them decisively. He rules for 15 years, one of the longest reigns in the imperial era. And yet, almost no one calls him great. He builds, he reforms taxes, he tightens up the coinage. You can feel the machinery of the empire humming more efficiently under him. But he's also paranoid, deeply so. He installs a personal security detail, writes blacklists, executes senators for minor offences. You never speak above a whisper near him. You never know who's listening. One fringe tidbit. He has the walls of his palace lined with reflective stones so he can spot assassins approaching from behind. It's genius and deeply sad. Domitian insists on being called Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. That doesn't go over great, especially not with senators, who still pretend this is a republic. The tension builds. Year after year, you keep waiting for it to snap. And then, in 96 CE, it does. Domitian is stabbed in his palace by a conspiracy of his own servants and officials. You walk the hallway where it happens. The walls are silent now. The stones reflect nothing. With him ends the Flavian dynasty. But oddly, Domitian's reign has lasting effects. Historians still debate whether he was a tyrant or an effective micromanager with a bad PR team. One thing's for sure, Rome is stronger, wealthier, and better organised than it was before him. And he lived for 15 full years, despite being universally hated by the elite. Not bad for a man surrounded by daggers. You step into the daylight, the forum buzzy. You stroll through the forum, dodging marble chips and gossip, and you can already feel the reset button being pressed. Domitian's corpse is barely cold, and the Senate is scrambling, like it just realised the Wi-Fi went out. They want stability, someone safe, boring, and ideally not prone to surprise executions. Enter Nerva. He's old, like really old for a Roman emperor, late 60s. That's practically ancient by imperial standards. You look at him and think, Grandpa's here to babysit the empire. And you're not wrong. The Senate breathes a sigh of relief. Nerva isn't flashy. He's a compromise candidate, elected not for strength, but for survivability. He doesn't want power. He just doesn't want Rome to fall apart under his watch. You follow him through quiet corridors, no assassins lurking, no creepy mirror walls. It feels weirdly peaceful, almost too peaceful, but you sense the real problem pretty quickly. The Praetorian Guard, the elite imperial bodyguards, don't respect him. They wanted Domitian, and they're still angry. One night, the guards burst into the palace, grab 2 conspirators who helped kill Domitian, and execute them without trial. Nerva just stands there, powerless, and that's when he realizes something important. To rule Rome, you don't just need popularity or wisdom. You need a guy with a sword who's loyal to you. So, in one of the smartest moves in imperial history, Nerva adopts a successor. Not just anyone, but Trajan, a respected general with the loyalty of the army and the resume of a battlefield legend. It's the first time a Roman emperor picks an heir based on merit, not bloodline. Historians still argue whether Nerva chose Trajan out of strategy or desperation, but it works. In 98 CE, after just 15 months of ruling, Nerva dies of natural causes. Natural. You almost don't believe it. No poison, no betrayal, no mysterious fever, just old age. A peaceful death in the imperial office. You kind of want to send him a thank you card. Trajan takes over, without a single blade drawn. And suddenly everything shifts. You walk beside Trajan as he reviews troops, eyes sharp, posture perfect. This isn't palace politics anymore. This is military Rome at full strength. Under Trajan, the empire isn't just maintained, it expands. North into Dacia, modern-day Romania. You hike up snowy hills with his legions, the clanking of armour in your ears. The Dacians put up a fight. They're fierce, skilled and fortified. But Trajan is relentless. The campaign is long, bloody and brutal, but victorious. By 106 CE, Dacia is annexed. Gold floods into Rome. You see it poured into new aqueducts, new harbours, and the grandest column you've ever laid eyes on. Trajan's Column. You tilt your head back to take in its spiralling carvings. It's a stone storyboard of conquest. But there's more to Trajan than expansion. He's a builder, a reformer. He restructures the grain dole, improves road systems, and launches public welfare programs for orphans. You walk through one of the markets he builds, multi-level, bustling, basically an ancient mall, and he's popular, like scary popular. Even senators praise him, some sincerely. For the first time in a long time, it feels like Rome is being led by someone who genuinely cares and has the skills to back it up. There's even a saying that survives for centuries. May you be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. High praise considering Augustus literally founded the empire. You're with Trajan when he pushes east into Parthia, trying to one-up Alexander the Great. He takes cities, crosses rivers, marches deep into Mesopotamia. But something shifts. The campaigns stretch thin. Resistance hardens. He falls ill. Somewhere near modern-day Iraq. 117 CE. Trajan doesn't make it back to Rome. He dies on the road, exhausted, possibly from a stroke or an infection. You watch as his ashes are carried back, placed in the base of his column, a warrior emperor laid to rest in stone. And the kicker? He ruled for 19 years. Almost 2 decades of successful reign, major expansion, economic growth, and genuine admiration. In Rome, that's as rare as finding an honest tax collector. One fringe tidbit. Some scholars speculate that Trajan may have had relationships with young male companions, which wasn't particularly scandalous for the time, but adds an interesting wrinkle to his public image as a stoic soldier-statesman. Historians still argue whether these claims are gossip, projection, or based in truth. You stand beside his column, the city buzzing around you. He's gone, but his legacy is everywhere. In stone, in roads, in the empire's borders, and his final gift, his adopted heir. Another careful choice, because Trajan knows what many before him didn't, that power without preparation is a recipe for chaos. So he picks someone quiet, bookish, stoic. You glance down the road, he's waiting in the wings. His name is Hadrian. And oh, you're going to need a good pair of walking sandals for W. You catch up with Hadrian just as he's taking the imperial reins, and right away things feel different. Gone is the conqueror's fire that burned so brightly in Trajan. Instead you find a calm, introspective glow, like someone who's less interested in setting the world on fire and more in keeping the hearth warm. Hadrian isn't even in Rome when Trajan dies. He's stationed in Syria, managing frontier affairs. And here's your first quirky tidbit. Trajan may not have officially named Hadrian as his heir before dying. His widow, Plotina, quiet, clever, and very loyal to Hadrian, allegedly signs Trajan's name on the adoption papers after death. Historians still argue whether this was a sneaky power move or just some well-timed paperwork. Either way, Hadrian ends up emperor, and he wastes no time making it clear. No more conquering. Seriously. He pulls back from Trajan's overextended eastern campaigns. You watch stunned Roman generals pack up their tents and head home, muttering into their beards. Hadrian's message is simple. The empire's big enough. Let's strengthen it. Organize it, defend it, and so you begin to walk. A lot, because Hadrian doesn't rule from a cushy palace. He travels more than any emperor before him. He inspects borders, fortresses, cities, and soldiers. You trudge across rivers, mountains, deserts. Rain soaks your cloak 1 week. Dry heat bakes your skin the next. 1 minute you're in Gaul, the next in Greece, then Egypt, Syria, back to Rome, then off to Britannia. And Britannia. You feel the damp chill as Hadrian surveys the unruly northern tribes of the island and decides that's far enough. So what does he do? He builds a wall, a literal wall, Hadrian's Wall, stretching across northern England. 73 miles of stone and turf, dotted with forts and mile castles. It's not to keep out invaders entirely, but to mark the boundary and control movement. You stand on it, wind whipping your tunic, and realise this is Hadrian's philosophy made real. Consolidate, organise, clarify. Hadrian is also a major builder elsewhere. Temples, libraries, the famous Pantheon is rebuilt under his watch. Its massive dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. You step inside and feel small, quiet, like time itself echoes in here. But Hadrian isn't just bricks and walls. He's deeply cultured. He writes poetry, studies Greek philosophy, wears a beard which is oddly controversial. Most previous emperors preferred the clean-shaven look. Hadrian goes full Socrates. And then there's Antinous. You notice him one day in the imperial entourage. Young, striking, a Bithynian Greek with a calm presence. Hadrian's affection for Antinous becomes legend. Warm, deep, and, by most accounts, romantic. They travel together constantly. It's obvious. They're inseparable. But then, tragedy. 130 CE. You're sailing down the Nile with the imperial party. Antinous is with you. Then one morning, he's gone. Drowned in the river. No one knows exactly how. Accident, suicide, ritual sacrifice. Historians still argue the why. Hadrian is devastated. You've never seen him like this. He mourns publicly, intensely. And then, he deifies Antinous, builds temples, founds a city named Antinopolis. Coins are minted with the youth's image. A new god enters the Roman pantheon. Not a mythic figure from centuries past, but a real boy, loved and lost. It's unprecedented. You walk past shrines where Romans light candles to this god of beauty, death and memory. And you feel the quiet ache in Hadrian's heart. The final years of his reign grow darker. He's ill, withdrawn, cranky. You hear rumours of executions, friends who fall out of favour. Even the Senate tenses around him. The warm philosopher-emperor becomes harder to reach. Still, Hadrian plans for succession carefully. At first he adopts a man named Aelius, who promptly dies of illness, not betrayal for once. Then he makes his most important move. Hadrian adopts Antoninus Pius with one condition. he must later adopt a promising young man named Marcus Aurelius. You nod, recognizing the brilliance. It's a human relay race, legacy by design, not luck. In 138 CE, Hadrian dies in his villa at Baiae, his health finally failing. He'd ruled for 21 years, a mix of intellect and infrastructure, grief and glory, a traveller and builder, a man who shaped the empire, not by sword, but by compass. You sit on a broken step of Hadrian's villa in Tivoli, now overgrown with wildflowers. Birds chirp. The sun rises gently over the ruins, and for a moment, Rome feels still. But don't get too comfortable, because his successor is waiting, and this next one might just outlive everyone. You blink and suddenly everything feels calm. Not quiet, not boring, but balanced, like someone finally tuned the empire's strings just right. Antoninus Pius has taken the reins, and if Trajan was the conqueror and Hadrian the philosopher, then Antoninus is the caretaker. You first meet him, seated behind a desk buried in scrolls, not a sword in sight. He's in his early 50s, silver at the temples, eyes kind but firm. He doesn't chase glory, he doesn't crave statues. He's not even all that interested in leaving Rome. In fact, Antoninus Pius never leaves Italy during his entire reign. Not once. And that alone earns him a special badge in the Emperor Survival Club, less travel, fewer assassins. He spends most of his time refining laws, calming tensions, and keeping the imperial engine humming. He smooths out legal inconsistencies across provinces, especially in inheritance and slavery laws, and emphasises fairness. You're there when he grants more rights to slaves, a bold and humane move for the time. He even bans the execution of slaves without a trial, and you can hear upper-class Romans grumbling into their wine. A mainstream historical fact. Under Antoninus, Rome reaches one of its most prosperous and peaceful stretches in history. No major wars, no civil unrest. The economy booms, and the frontiers remain mostly quiet. You're beginning to wonder if he's slipped some chamomile into the empire's wine supply. You stroll through Rome's streets during one of his many public festivals. Statues are modest, games are tasteful, and tax collectors are unusually polite. Antoninus doesn't dazzle, but he endures. And not just politically. This man lives. And lives. He rules for 23 years. That's nearly a quarter of a century, in a job where most guys don't survive half a decade. You start to suspect he's either invincible or just very, very good at not rocking the boat. Here's your quirky tidbit. His nickname Pius isn't just about piety. One theory is that it comes from his fierce defense of Hadrian's memory. After Hadrian's death, the Senate had tried to undeify him, basically a cosmic unfriending. Antoninus wasn't having it. He insisted on divine honours, buried Hadrian properly, and defended his legacy like a loyal son. Some say the Pius stuck more for that stubborn loyalty than for religious devotion. You spend afternoons beside Antoninus as he drafts legislation and debates philosophy. He's sharp, generous, and deeply ethical, but never flashy. Still, even a smooth sea has undercurrents. Rebellions spark on the fringes, Mauritania, Britain, Judea. But Antoninus delegates wisely. He sends governors and generals, not himself, to handle things. You watch from a hilltop as his appointees quell unrest with minimal bloodshed. And then there's the wall. Not Hadrian's wall, mind you. Antoninus builds his own version farther north in Scotland. Less stone, more turf, but still a statement. The Antonine Wall. Yet it doesn't last. Within a couple of decades, the Romans fall back to Hadrian's line. Historians still argue whether the wall was a political stunt or a genuine attempt to expand, but either way, it's a blip on Antoninus's otherwise steady record. Time drifts gently forward. Antoninus grows older, whiter, slower, but never out of touch. He keeps Marcus Aurelius close by grooming him like a bonsai tree, careful pruning and constant care. Marcus writes philosophy in his spare time, and Antoninus makes sure he's reading the right books, meeting the right minds, and understanding the quiet art of ruling without cruelty. And then, in 161 CE, Antoninus falls ill. He knows it's the end. No theatrics, no drawn-out drama. Just a final night, a short sleep, and a life closed gently, like a book's last page. You're at his bedside. He tells the chamberlain to pay the guard his due and dismisses everyone with a nod. His last word, equanimity. He ruled longer than anyone since Augustus. 23 years of peace and stability. No scandals, no civil wars, no paranoid purges. You step outside into the Roman morning. The sky is pale blue. The kind birds glide through without fear. For once it feels like an emperor didn't just die but finished. And standing at the edge of the forum, waiting patiently, is the next in line. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher, the thinker, and whether he likes it or not, the emperor. 4 of the 5 good emperors have now come and gone. Men who lasted far longer than most, guided by reasoned balance. And let's be honest, some good luck and decent food safety practices. Marcus was the last flickering light of that golden stretch. And now it's Commodus's turn. You really should grab a helmet. You don't even need to wait long. Commodus makes an entrance the moment Marcus is cold. He strides into the camp like a gladiator-turned CEO. Chest-puffed hair, perfect cloak, unnecessarily dramatic. And you can almost hear the philosophical echoes of Marcus Aurelius sighing from the afterlife. All that stoic reflection, now handed off to a man who thinks he's Hercules in a toga. Commodus is only 18 when he becomes sole emperor in 180 CE. And sure, he starts off promising. He signs a peace treaty with the Germanic tribes, brings the army home, and looks like he might just keep things steady. But then, oh boy, then he gets bored. And boredom, it turns out, is Commodus's gateway drug. Boredom leads to paranoia. Paranoia leads to indulgence. And indulgence, that leads to gladiator fights. Yes, real ones. You're there in the Colosseum when the emperor himself strides into the arena. Sword in hand, lion skin draped over his shoulders. He's not playing pretend. Commodus fights against wounded animals, against disabled gladiators, against anyone he knows won't land a killing blow, and he charges the Roman treasury for every appearance. Quirky tidbit. He renames Rome after himself. The entire city, not just a street or a statue, the whole thing. He calls it Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana. That's like waking up and finding your hometown renamed Gregville, because the mayor really likes the sound of his own name. Historians still argue whether Commodus was clinically unstable, deeply narcissistic, or just raised in the impossible shadow of Marcus Aurelius and decided to light the whole stage on fire instead of trying to act on it. Either way, the Senate hates him. The elite despise him. Even the guards shift nervously around him. And you stop making eye contact. Too dangerous. What makes Commodus's reign especially fascinating, beyond the sweaty theatrics and divine cosplay, is that he lives longer than you'd expect. He rules for 12 years. 12. In a job where one bad banquet can end your career and your life, Commodus somehow keeps spinning the plates. That's longer than Nero, longer than Caligula, longer than most men who've called themselves emperor while drinking from a poisoned goblet. You watch the city twist around him. Corruption blooms. He sells public offices to the highest bidder, executes senators over bad dreams. The empire is now a circus, and he's both ringleader and clown. But even clowns have enemies. It starts small whispers in the corridors, notes passed under doors, sidelong glances. His inner circle grows thin. Eventually, even his lover Marcia turns against him. She finds her name on an execution list. Yes, his lover. And that's when the daggers come out. December 31st, 92 CE, the final day of the year. You're in the palace and the air is heavy. Commodus is in the bath, then eats, then lies down to sleep. His bodyguard, a wrestler named Narcissus, slips in. A brief struggle, then silence. Just like that, the self-proclaimed God Emperor, the reincarnated Hercules, the gladiator-in-chief, is dead. Not in the arena, not on the battlefield, but in his bedroom. He was 31 years old. You'd expect celebration relief, some kind of cleansing fire. But what follows is chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. The Senate declares him a public enemy. They try to erase his name from monuments. His statues are torn down, his decrees reversed. Commodus's memory is literally outlawed. Damnatio memoriae, the Roman version of hitting delete on history. But here's the twist: Commodus, for all his wild behaviour, was the son of Marcus Aurelius. His bloodline was legitimate, and his death marks a definitive end, not just of his reign, but of the Pax Romana itself. That long golden stretch of relative peace and stability gone. You stand in the forum and it's like watching a dam burst. Within a year, 5 different men will claim the throne. A new century begins, with a full-on power vacuum. And the empire, well, it starts cracking at the edges. But through the smoke and rubble, one truth lingers. Commodus may have been reckless, theatrical, dangerous, but he lasted 12 years on the throne. That's longer than many emperors who played it safe. So you ask yourself, is it better to rule well and fade, or rule madly and never be forgotten? The answer: maybe don't fight giraffes in public. But hey, hindsight is 2020. You barely have time to breathe. Commodus is gone, and suddenly Rome feels like a kicked anthill. Everyone's running, shouting, backstabbing. It's 193 CE, the year of the 5 emperors. Year 5, in 1 year. You're going to need extra sandals just to keep up. First up, Pertinax, a strict no-nonsense ex-soldier chosen by the Senate. You follow him into the palace as he immediately tries to clean up Commodus's mess. Cancel the gladiator vanity projects. Cut the spending, rein in the Praetorian Guard, but here's the problem: you don't tell the Guard they're getting a pay cut. They don't like that. Not even 3 months into his reign, Pertinax is cornered in the palace courtyard by angry soldiers. You're there just outside the colonnade when the shouting turns violent. Blades flash, Pertinax falls. And with that, the throne is for sale. No, literally. The Praetorian Guard auctions the empire to the highest bidder. Wealthy senator Didius Julianus wins by promising an obscene bonus to the troops. You feel your jaw drop as he's declared emperor not by popular vote or military support but by bank transfer. Historians still argue whether the Guard actually intended to install him or just wanted the money. But either way, Julianus moves into the palace like someone who just bought a haunted mansion off Craigslist. Meanwhile, the provinces are fuming. 3 powerful generals each stake their own claim to the purple Septimius Severus in Pannonia, Pescennius Niger in Syria, and Clodius Albinus in Britain. It's like a Roman version of musical chairs, but with more legions and fewer rules. You decide to follow the frontrunner, Septimius Severus. He marches on Rome with brutal efficiency, like someone reading a to-do list that ends in "become emperor." The Senate, sensing which way the wind's blowing, declares him legitimate. Didius Julianus is executed in the palace, another short-reigned casualty of Rome's revolving throne. Severus takes power and gets to work. He consolidates the army, declares himself the new Augustus. Then, with the energy of someone who drinks too much spiced wine, he turns east to crush Pescennius Niger. You ride with him across Anatolia, watching city after city fall. Niger is dead within a year. Then Severus turns west. Clodius Albinus, formerly his ally, now his rival. They meet in 197 CE at the Battle of Lugdunum, in modern-day France, one of the largest and bloodiest civil battles in Roman history. You're on a nearby hill watching the chaos unfold, like a nightmare painted in iron and flame. Severus wins, just barely. With his rivals gone, he finally breathes easy. Well, sort of. This is no philosopher king like Marcus. Severus is a military man, through and through. He doubles the pay of Roman soldiers, expands their privileges, lets them marry. He's the first emperor who truly governs like a general in command of a permanent campaign. Mainstream fact: Septimius Severus founds a dynasty. It's not exactly golden, but it's tough and long-lasting by Roman standards. He brings relative stability after a stretch of mayhem, and somehow rules for 18 years. 18. Not bad for a guy who marched into power on the corpses of 3 rivals. Quirky tidbit: Severus is obsessed with death, not in a creepy goth way, but in the "let's build a massive tomb in case things go sideways" kind of way. He starts work on a family mausoleum early in his reign, and he never quite stops thinking about what comes after. As he ages, Severus becomes more paranoid. He tightens the screws, executes senators, suspected traitors, even family members. You spend evenings in the palace, hearing whispers of purges and poisonings, and always the distant clink of armour soldiers, never far from the emperor's side. And then, as if scripted, Severus falls ill. It's 211 CE, and he's in Britain overseeing another campaign against the northern tribes. You're with him in the cold north, his tent battered by wind, his breath frosty in the air. He gathers his sons Caracalla and Geta and gives them his final advice. Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. Then he dies, wordlessly. No drama, just gone. And what follows? Well, let's just say his sons didn't quite get the be harmonious part. But Severus, he made it 18 years through war, betrayal and chaos. Not because he was beloved, not because he was wise, but because he understood the one thing that still runs Rome. Power belongs to the men who command the legions. You're barely back from Severus's funeral before his sons Caracalla and Geta start eyeing each other like wolves in a cramped cage. Brothers, technically. But in Rome, blood is only thicker than water until there's a throne involved. Their father had told them to share power, co-rule like Marcus Aurelius once did with Lucius Verus. But let's be real, you've seen this movie before, and it doesn't end in hugs and shared office space. At first they try. You trail them through the palace halls as they divide the court like it's a pizza. Caracalla takes one half of the empire, Geta the other. Even the palace gets a wall built right down the middle. No joke. One literal wall, 2 emperors, and an entire city caught in the awkward middle. But you can feel the tension every time their paths almost cross. The servants whisper. The senators avoid picking sides too loudly. Historians still argue whether Geta was genuinely more peaceful or just better at hiding ambition. Either way, Caracalla decides he's done playing nice. It's late December 211 CE. You're in the palace when Caracalla invites Geta for a peace talk, mother present, guards standing by, a thin smile stretching across Caracalla's face like soft wax. Geta walks in. A moment later screams. Guards cut him down, right there in their mother's arms. The blood spreads faster than the news. And Caracalla. He doesn't blink. What follows is one of the nastiest purges in imperial memory. Caracalla orders Geta's name erased from records. Statues chiselled away, coins melted, thousands executed supporters, friends, even bureaucrats who hesitated too long before saluting the new sole emperor. He rules alone now, and weirdly he lasts. Caracalla's reign stretches from 211 to 217 CE. 6 years. Not forever, but in Roman time, that's a solid run, especially after fratricide. And what keeps him going, oddly enough, is a blend of fear, flattery, and a smart populist move. Because in 212, he issues the Constitutio Antoniniana, a sweeping law that grants Roman citizenship to nearly every free man in the empire. Just like that, you, your cousin, and your favourite food vendor in Gaul are all officially Roman. It's a huge moment, both historically and economically. Mainstream fact, this decree expands the citizen base from a privileged few to nearly everyone under Roman rule. Taxes go up, military recruitment gets easier, and the idea of being Roman spreads like a nice olive tapenade on warm flatbread. Why'd he do it, scholars debate. Some say it was for tax revenue, others to boost loyalty. Still, others think Caracalla just wanted everyone to like him, especially after, murdering his brother in front of mum. But here's where things get weirder. Caracalla is obsessed with Alexander the Great, like full-on cosplay level obsession. He starts dressing like him, styling his hair the same way, even copying military campaigns, just to feel closer to his ancient hero. You find yourself in provinces like Syria and Egypt, trudging behind a man chasing the ghost of a legend. And like many men who confuse admiration with imitation, he overreaches. On one campaign in the east, his temper gets the better of him. He insults the Parthian royal family. Some say he even tries to arrange a fake marriage just to provoke war. Eventually his own bodyguard, the Praetorian prefect Macrinus, gets nervous, and in 217 CE, while Caracalla is relieving himself along the roadside outside Carrhae, yes, mid-bathroom break, an assassin strikes. One clean blade, no fuss. Just like that, Caracalla's gone. He was 29, quirky tidbit. His loyal soldiers build him a massive public bathhouse in Rome. Thermae Antoninianae, one of the largest and grandest of its kind, still standing in ruins today. So even if he didn't leave a noble legacy, he left warm water and fancy marble. Not bad. But Rome, it's spinning again. Macrinus, the man behind the assassination, declares himself emperor, first time in Roman history that someone outside the senatorial class pulls it off. He was a knight in Equus. You watch senators squirm, suddenly realising the social ladder has just been kicked over. But Macrinus doesn't last. He's unpopular, unprepared and unlucky. After just a year, a new challenger rises, a teenager named Elagabalus, backed by Caracalla's extended family and a large eastern army. Elagabalus is different. You see him arrive in Rome wearing silk robes covered in jewellery with a sacred black meteorite he claims represents the sun god Elagabal. That's not a metaphor. He actually builds a temple and worships the rock, with music and dancing, and possibly some very confusing rituals involving lions. Historians still argue how much of Elagabalus's legend is truth and how much was slander. But what's clear is that Rome, already tired from years of imperial drama, is not ready for this. Yet somehow Elagabalus lasts 4 years. Not bad for a teenage high priest with a sun rock. Still, even you can sense it, he's losing touch. The people are restless, the guards wary, the Senate offended, and his own family. They're making backup plans. In 22 CE, Elagabalus and his mother are killed by the Praetorian Guard, dragged through the streets, bodies thrown into the Tiber, another emperor erased. But don't get too comfortable. From the ashes, a quiet boy steps forward. His name is Severus Alexander. He's 13, and believe it or not, he'll rule longer than all of them. So now you're pacing beside a 13-year-old boy in sandals too big for his feet, crowned emperor of the largest empire on earth. No pressure, his name Severus Alexander, and unlike the drama magnates before him, he's thoughtful, reserved and tries to actually govern with reason. Rome surprisingly breathes a little easier. His reign begins in 222 CE. His mother, Julia Mamaea, acts as regent, and she's got her hands deep in the imperial cookie jar. You see her sit in on Senate meetings, issue orders, and surround her son with scholars and philosophers. It's a welcome break from all the assassinations and divine rock worshipping. Mainstream fact Severus Alexander brings back traditional Roman values. He respects the Senate. He curbs wild military spending. He even promotes legal reforms, slowly stabilising a state that's been through a blender on puree mode for decades. But don't get too cosy. This piece, it's fragile, like holding a cake in the rain, because the empire's borders are burning again. Over in the east, a new powerhouse is rising, the Sassanid Empire. More aggressive, more organised, and definitely not impressed by a teenage emperor in a toga. In 230 CE, the Sassanid king Shapur pushes into Roman territory. You march with Alexander's army toward Persia. The soldiers, used to swaggering alpha emperors, look sideways at this bookish lad and his cautious counsel. They want fire. He gives them treaties. Still he holds his ground. He campaigns smart, avoids big losses, and even secures a temporary peace. That's more than many of his louder predecessors managed. But back home, Rome is getting antsy. Open debate moment, historians still argue whether Severus Alexander was genuinely weak or simply trying to build a more stable, enlightened kind of rule. Was he too gentle or just too early quirky tidbit? He reportedly kept a bust of Jesus alongside Orpheus and Apollonius in his private shrine. That's right, an emperor of Rome with a prototype religion mood board. He wanted unity, not fanaticism. a spiritual buffet, if you will. But you know what really turns the tide? The Germans, in 234 CE, the Germanic tribes push across the Rhine frontier, and Alexander leads his army north. You trudge through mud, rain and forests that feel like they're watching you. The soldiers are cold, hungry, and worse, they're questioning the emperor's spine. Alexander tries diplomacy again, offers gold for peace. It's a bold, calculated move. But the legions, they want blood, not bargaining. The grumbling starts to sound like growling, and then it happens. In 235 CE, during the campaign in Germania, the army revolts. They declare their general, Maximinus Thrax, as emperor, a giant of a man, son of a peasant, pure muscle and raw charisma. You barely have time to pack your things before the assassins arrive. Alexander and his mother are murdered in their tent. The boy who ruled for 13 years longer than Commodus Caracalla or Elagabalus dies with barely a shout, quiet to the end, and just like that, the crisis of the 3rd century begins. Maximinus Thrax is the first of what will become a revolving door of emperors, many rising from the military ranks, most not lasting long enough to finish decorating their palaces. You stand on the edge of a cliff, metaphorically speaking. Rome's about to spiral. Maximinus rules harshly, paranoid, suspicious, obsessed with loyalty and crushing dissent. The Senate doesn't trust him, and eventually rebels rise. First in Africa, then in Italy. Civil wars become a seasonal event. Grain shipments falter, borders are under siege. Still Maximinus clings to power until 238 CE, when a coalition of senators and rival emperors, yes plural, bring him down. His own troops assassinate him during a siege. His head is sent to Rome in a basket. Cheerful, the year of the 6 emperors begins. You're exhausted just thinking about it. Gordian I and II in Africa. Pupienus, Balbinus. Finally, a young boy named Gordian III is declared emperor by popular support, just 13 years old, like Alexander before him. Deja vu, anyone? But Gordian III actually holds on. With help from able generals, he pushes back against Persian advances, even winning a few key battles. You catch glimpses of hope, like sunlight through a collapsing roof. Quirky note: Gordian III was obsessed with art and architecture. He began restoring temples even as war raged beyond the walls. It's like rearranging the furniture mid-earthquake. But hey, points for optimism. And yet the churn continues. In 244 CE, Gordian III dies mysteriously in Mesopotamia. Some say illness, others point fingers at his successor, Philip the Arab. Historians still debate whether it was a battlefield mishap or a palace conspiracy. Philip rules for 5 years. He even celebrates Rome's 1000th anniversary in 248 CE with parades and games. You stroll through the streets that day, watching elephants and tigers parade past statues of emperors long forgotten. The irony: Rome feels older than ever. Tired, brittle, too big to fix. Then comes Decius and Gallus and Aemilian, all emperors, all dead within months or years. One falls in battle, another from plague, one simply disappears. It's a dizzying blur. You stop trying to remember their names and start remembering how they die. That's when you meet Valerian. An older senator turned emperor. Valerian seems stable, reforms the currency, fortifies the borders, even appoints his son Gallienus as co-ruler, finally someone planning for the future. But you've read this script before. In 260 CE, Valerian rides out to face the Persian army and loses. Not just a battle, everything. He's captured alive, the first Roman emperor ever taken prisoner. And here's your oddball detail. Legend has it, the Persian king used Valerian as a human footstool to mount his horse. Other versions say he was stuffed after death like a gruesome trophy. Historians still argue how much is true, but either way, it's a low point. Gallienus rules alone now, and for all his faults, he lasts 15 years. A miracle, really. You wander the ruins with him. Watch him dodge assassination attempts, bribe generals, fortify cities. He fights invaders, rogue governors, even a breakaway empire in Gaul. It's a wild balancing act, less ruling, more spinning plates on fire. He dies in 268 CE, stabbed by his own men. Rome, meanwhile, survives, barely. And next you're about to meet an emperor who looks at all this chaos and decides enough. A fixer is coming. His name is Aurelian. You're getting good at spotting patterns now. Ambition, betrayal will repeat. But tonight you feel something different, stirring in the imperial winds. The year is 270 CE, and standing at the edge of a collapsing empire is Lucius Domitius Aurelianus. You'll know him as Aurelian, and trust me, he's not here to politely ask for order. Aurelian rises from humble beginnings, a peasant born in Illyricum, and he's a career soldier through and through. You've marched beside generals before, but this one, he radiates steel. No frills, no poetry, just a man-shaped battering ram aimed at Rome's problems. And there are plenty of them. When Aurelian becomes emperor, the Roman Empire is splintered like a dropped clay pot. In the east, Queen Zenobia rules the Palmyrene Empire, a breakaway state, controlling Egypt, Syria, and more. In the west, the Gallic Empire sits pretty with its own emperor's troops and taxis. And in the middle, a ragged Rome, unsure of itself, surrounded by enemies and led by ghosts. But not for long. You follow Aurelian as he races east, swift, brutal, brilliant. He defeats Zenobia at the Battle of Emesa in 272 CE, capturing the queen and marching her through the streets of Rome in golden chains. A showy move, sure, but also a message. The empire is won again. Mainstream Fact Aurelian reunites the Roman Empire in just 5 years, earning the title Restitutor Orbis Restorer of the world. Not bad for someone who started life behind a plough. Quirky tidbit, Zenobia, despite being paraded like a trophy, is reportedly treated well after her capture. She's given a villa near Tivoli and lives out her days in quiet Roman comfort. Some say she even marries a Roman senator. Now that's a retirement plan. But Aurelian's not done yet. He turns west and crushes the Gallic Empire, bringing those territories back under central control. By 274 CE, Rome is whole again for the first time in decades. You can almost feel the empire exhale, and yet there's still chaos under the surface. Invasions continue. The economy's a mess. Inflation is spiraling like a toddler on too much honey wine. So what does Aurelian do? He builds a wall. No, seriously. The Aurelian Wall's massive defensive stone fortifications that still stand in Rome today. Nearly 12 miles long, encircling the city like a nervous hug. You walk beside the labourers as they hoist bricks under torchlight. Rome hasn't needed walls for centuries. Now the fear is real. He also tries to reform the currency, improve grain supply, and restore religious unity. Aurelian backs the cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, as a kind of empire-wide religion, hoping it might unify the fractured spiritual landscape. Historians still debate whether this was a political move or genuine belief, but either way, it's clever. He gives Rome a central god, one radiant enough to compete with Jupiter Mithras and all the trendy Eastern imports. And maybe, just maybe, it works. For 5 years, Aurelian holds the empire together with pure willpower and a lot of sharp steel. But you already know what comes next, don't you? In 275 CE, while preparing to march east again, Aurelian is assassinated by his own staff, tricked by a forged document, convincing them that he planned their deaths. A fatal typo in the story of Rome, and yet his legacy lingers like the scent of pine smoke on your cloak. The empire stands battered but unified, and soon after, a new emperor will rise with a longer-term solution. You trudge forward into the twilight of the 3rd century, and into the golden glow of the next. Enter Diocletian. He becomes emperor in 284 CE, and for the first time, in what feels like forever, you sense structure forming. Diocletian doesn't just govern, he systematizes, divides the empire into eastern and western halves, appoints co-emperors, creates the tetrarchy, a rule of 4. It's complicated, bureaucratic, A bit like trying to schedule a family dinner with 4 stubborn uncles, but it works, kind of. Mainstream fact: Diocletian's reforms stabilise the empire after 50 years of chaos. He reorganises the military, improves tax collection, fixes prices on goods to slow inflation. It's not perfect, but it's the first time in decades you're not listening for distant swords every morning. Oddball moment: Diocletian is one of the only emperors to retire voluntarily. In 305 CE, he steps down and moves to a palace in modern-day Croatia, where he gardens, yes gardens, and reportedly grows the best cabbages in the region. He's quoted probably apocryphally as saying, "If you could see my cabbages, you'd never ask me to return to politics." Fair enough. After Diocletian, the system wobbles but doesn't collapse. Constantine rises. Christianity spreads, but you're well past the era of emperors living fast and dying young. So what's the takeaway from this long, blood-spattered parade of rulers? Well, despite the daggers, plagues and eccentric sun-god obsessions, quite a few emperors lasted longer than you'd expect. Some outlived wars, others outlived scandals, and a few even outlived their reputations. And maybe that's the real magic here. You walking beside marble statues brought to life, listening to the quiet hum of history at night. Watching emperors fall, not just from blades, but from boredom, ambition, and sometimes the sheer weight of power itself. Rome endures, though. It stumbles, breaks, rebuilds, kind of like you. So now let's dim the firelight, slow the drums of history, and let the past settle softly behind us. Wind down 300 words. The torchlight fades behind your eyelids, now leaving only gentle embers of memory. The clanging armour, the shouting crowds, the hush of palace gardens, they dissolve into a low, steady silence. You lie back under an open Roman sky, stars drifting across the heavens like forgotten names etched on stone. A cool breeze wraps around you, like a cloak pulling the weight of all those emperors gently from your shoulders. Let go of Caracalla's rage. Let Elagabalus's theatrics melt into dreams. Forget the endless marching, the shifting loyalties, the brief sparks of glory. They're all just echoes, now faded murals in the bathhouses of memory. Even the mighty Aurelian, galloping across battlefields, fades into the soft rumble of distant thunder. His legacy may still stand in stone walls and broken coins, but here in the quiet between heartbeats, he rests like all the rest. Breathe in. You've made it through centuries of survival, through triumphs, tragedies, reforms, betrayals, and the kind of royal drama that would make reality shows blush. And now you get to rest. But still, the empire is quiet tonight. The lions have been fed. The scrolls are rolled. The doors of the Senate are closed. Sleep well, citizen of history. And when you wake, may your world be just a little more orderly than theirs. End of script. Sweet dreams.